Hello and welcome. Today I want to talk about this sliding gate opener. This is by a brand called CO-Z, and if you've done any research at all on these things, you're probably already aware that this is by far the least expensive option out there. Not only that, but it has over 3,000 outstanding reviews on Amazon. And it's for those reasons that I bought and installed it. My opinion of it so far is that it's outstanding. I've had it installed for several months. I've had zero issues with it. Plus I have a very big, heavy door and it moves it no problem. So I think it's great. I would recommend it to anybody. I don't think you can beat it, especially for the price. Now, the one piece of criticism that I was able to find online about this in the reviews was people said that the directions weren't very good. And to be honest, they're very brief. However, I've never installed one of these before. So with no experience, I was able to install it from those directions. So I think they are adequate. However, I did have to do a few things differently. So I'm going to walk you through my entire install process. I'm going to show you how I did it, and I'm going to give you a few tips that I think are really going to help. So let's do that. Okay, so step number one is to install these brackets that the chain attaches to. The kit comes with two different kinds of brackets. It comes with a rounded bracket, and that's for if your gate has round metal poles. And it also comes with the square brackets, which are the ones that I've used, if you can see it here. It's square in the back. And this bracket looks like it's set up for a 4x4 post. I don't have anything like that on my gate. The sturdiest thing I have are these braces. So that's what I've clamped to. But the threads on here aren't long enough for me to clamp to anything this thin. So what I did was I found these 3/4 inch spacers at the hardware store. And by using those, then I'm able to clamp to this 1 inch thick brace. And this has worked very well. Step number two is to install the motor itself. But in order to do that, my door is kind of wonky, so I wasn't real sure what straight was. So what I did was I tied a string from this bracket to the other bracket, and I put it out here at the end because I knew my chain was going to be as far out as I could get it. So after I tied the string, then I was able to place the motor and line the gears up with the string, just like it would line up with the chain here. And that told me what straight was to the chain, which is the important part. So that worked well, and I would highly recommend doing that. And then once you've lined up your opener with the string, then you can roll your gate back and forth and make sure that everything clears. In my case, I've got these braces, and in the middle of the door, I have two of these braces on top of each other. So I've got about 2 inches of extra stuff on the back that had to clear the motor, and it just barely cleared. But if yours doesn't clear, what you're going to need to do is rig this up to move it out farther, so your chain is out farther from the door. That will solve your clearance problem. All right, so once you've set your machine in place and you know everything clears, then you can mark your holes and get to drilling. Now, to actually mount the machine down, this kit comes with bolts that are in the shape of an L. And what those are for is if you're pouring concrete, you stick the L part in the concrete, and then when it dries, you'd have a bolt sticking out that you could put a nut on. Since I wasn't pouring any concrete, I didn't do that. I went to the hardware store and I bought some concrete anchors. And how those work is you drill a hole in the concrete, you hammer them down into the hole, and then as you tighten a nut on top, the bottom of the anchor expands, and as it expands, it grabs into the concrete and holds tight. So the one tip that I can give you about that is make sure that the length of those that you get is suitable to your concrete. Because in my case, this concrete slab that I anchored into, it's not very thick. So I got the shortest ones that I could find at the hardware store, and those work great. You want them to be in the concrete when they expand, not through the concrete when they expand. All right, so as far as drilling goes, it turned out to be very easy. I looked it up on YouTube. I used a hammer drill and a masonry bit, but the videos that I saw on YouTube said you don't actually need the hammer drill. You can do it with a regular drill, but you are going to need a concrete bit. So make sure that you size the bit to the anchors, and you're good to go. Just drill it out, hammer those in, tighten them down. Everything's great. One thing to note is I only use 2 anchors to hold this thing down. It's right up against the edge of the concrete, and so I didn't want to drill the other 2 out. I was afraid I'd crack the concrete. So I just used 2, and that seems to be working just fine. All right, the next step is installing the chain itself. Now the chain comes in two pieces. So for me, I had to connect the two pieces together to make it long enough. And then I had to shorten that piece down to exactly what I needed. So in order to do this, you're gonna need a chain adjustment tool. I don't have mine with me, unfortunately, or I'd show it to you, but I'll put a link to it down below. But you are gonna need one of these in order to shorten it to the length that you want. And the tool is very easy to use. You shouldn't have any problem with it. It just clamps onto the chain, and then it's got a part that you can spin, and as you spin it, it pushes a pointy bit that runs right into the pin in the chain, and it pops it out. So then you can shorten it to just what you need. The next step is wiring it up. And the directions tell you to bury the wire, but of course I didn't do that. Instead, what I did was I used an extension cord, as you can see here. So I bought the Amazon brand extension cords. Those seem to be the cheapest available. I bought 100 feet of it because I ran it up and over the top of this carport because I didn't want it running across the driveway. And you just basically just cut the end off, and when you open it up, you're gonna find 3 wires inside. White, black, and green, those are exactly what you need to wire this thing. So plug it into the wall, wire it just like the directions will tell you, and it's good to go. The other thing that I did was, I don't know if you can see these, I've got these clear cable holders. These worked really well. They have really nice 2-sided tape on the back, and they also come with screws. So I screwed them down as well, just to make sure that they don't fall off in the Arizona heat. I like them a lot. They worked great for the cable management. I will put links to those down below as well. Now, after you've wired it, the next step is programming the remotes, and that is super simple. There's a button on the motherboard, you push it, you push a button on here, and those are done. But there's another part there's a switch that's on the motherboard that controls what's open and what's closed, and that depends on what side of the door you've mounted your opener on. Now, I read a review online that said this part was actually wrong in their instructions. So what I did is there's also lights on the motherboard, one that lights up when it's opening and one that lights up when it's closing. So my recommendation is just pay attention to that. Close it, make sure the closing light's on, and vice versa, and you're good to go. You don't even have to worry about what direction the switch is. If you do that, you'll have no issues. The final install step is installing these magnets. And these magnets tell the opener when to stop for when the gate is all the way open and when it's closed. So you've got 2 of these to install. Now, what I did here was I just ran the machine, hit the button, let it move, and then I just waved these around behind it until I could determine where it was that it actually shut them off. With the case off of the motor, there's a flat panel on the back, and that's the sensor. So you can just wave them around on there until you figure out where they work. And then I took a Sharpie and I just made a mark right on that sensor. And then you can roll the door to the position where you want it closed, right? You line up with that mark, look at the door, and you can just eyeball it, and you know, okay, I need a sensor there. And then you roll the gate all the way open to where you want it to stop, and you do the same thing to the mark that you made for opening. You can just eyeball it and say, okay, I need another sensor there. And that'll put you close enough that you can do your mounts. I had to add a 2x4, so I had something to mount them onto, but they slide back and forth a bit, so if you're close, if you're just even remotely close, you have some room to adjust it. Now, I had one additional issue that was specific to my door, but I want to point this out just in case you have it as well. Originally, I had 2 of these brackets. I had another one right here, and the door would fit right in between them. And that was no problem if you were closing it by hand. But the problem was, when it opened, as soon as it cleared this bracket, the gate would tip out a little bit. And that meant that when the motor closed it, it would always run into this outside brace. It wouldn't fit in between. So this piece of metal is what is supposed to cover the gears on the motor. But I didn't have the clearance to put this back on. So what I've done here is I mounted it on top of a 2x4, and that gives me this nice slant. And now when the door closes, even if it's tilted a little bit, it runs into this and gets pushed up vertical right where it's supposed to be. That prevents people from yanking on it, right? If they pull on it, it's nice and tight, stuck in between there, they can't yank it down. So this worked really well. If you run into a problem like that, feel free to steal that one. So that's it. If you learned anything, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. That would help me out greatly. Also, should you decide to purchase any of these products, I would really appreciate it if you use the links down below. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and then I get a little something for it as well, which I would really, really appreciate. Thank you so much.